Okay, I need my glasses. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ruth Heronshar, President of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. On behalf of the League, I welcome you to the 2025 Florida Legislative Session Recap. Today's program is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and our website, which is lwvmanatee, all one word, .org. Any use of the recording, other than showing it in its entirety, must get the permission of the League. At the end of the presentations by our speakers, they will be taking questions. Please put your questions in chat for Nina Tortelli. Please direct your questions in chat to Nina Tortelli and state which speaker the question is for. It is my pleasure to introduce you to each of our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Monica Elliott, and she is the League of Women Voters of Florida Voter Services Action Team Chair. After her retirement in 2018 as Professor of Plant Pathology at the University of Florida, she joined the League of Women Voters of Broward County. She was president of the Broward County League from 2020 to 2023 and is currently Broward's Voter Services Chair. She is passionate about the importance of voting to our society and believes the right to vote and ability to vote should never be taken for granted. Monica will be covering voting and gun safety legislation. Our second speaker is Alice Newlon. Alice was president of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County from 2019 to 2023. I think I'll do better without my glasses. She was co-president from 23 to 25. She has been an advocate for reproductive rights since the 1980s and was instrumental in the Manatee County effort to get Amendment 4 on the ballot and passed in terms of being on the ballot and being voted on. She was critical to that effort. Alice is an advanced Florida master naturalist, and prior to being president of her local league was Natural Resources Chair. Alice will be covering reproductive rights and environmental legislation. Our third speaker, Dr. Jill Lewis-Spector, currently chairs the League of Women Voters of Florida Education Action Team, as well as the Sarasota County League's Education Committee. Formerly of New Jersey, she was a member of the League of Women Voters of New Jersey's Board of Directors from 2017 to 2020. She founded and served as co-president of the LWV Greater New Brunswick Area, New Jersey, and chaired the State League's Education Committee. In her professional life, Dr. Lewis-Spector is a professor emerita of literacy education at New Jersey City University. Jill will be covering education legislation. And now, Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I spent a good part of my career as an extension specialist with the University of Florida. So I just automatically use slides. So forgive me for doing that. And hopefully everyone can see the slides. Okay. So the League of Women Voters, as you know, the local leagues have input into what the 4 legislative priorities are going to be for our league during each legislative session. And voting in elections, gun violence prevention, reproductive health and justice, and education were the 4 legislative priorities. But we do try to advocate on other issues that we know are important to league members whenever that's possible. And one of the ones is usually natural resources and clean energy. It's always kind of a tie there for that 4th spot. So I'm going to start out talking about voting in elections and then gun violence prevention. So these were the election bills that our league was supporting. These are all things that we're familiar with. The use of campaign funds for child care expense was um, proposed last year. This year it did at least get committee hearings in the Senate. It didn't have any traction in the House. We were also proposing the ratification of the ERA to the U.S. Constitution. The national popular vote is submitted every year by somebody within the legislature. We also had a database bill that was going to be used for helping to restore voting rights. There was the big Florida Voting Rights Act, and then putting voting opportunities in college campuses. None of these made it. The only one that made it anywhere was a child care expense using the campaign funds. Um, but I'm sure, well, I know we will see all of these next year, and maybe we'll get just a little bit further. Sometimes it takes multiple years before we see any traction on a particular bill. So those were quote unquote the good bills that were in the legislature this year. We were tracking approximately 30 bills in the Senate and the House. Um, and in general, it was a year where there really wasn't a lot being done on the voting front. Interesting, a hot topic was candidate qualifying and filing fees. There were at least six bills that contained these topics. And you think, well, why is this so important? And it has to do with the parties. Each party, the Republicans and the Democrats, they want to be sure that no one strays easily from one party to the other or to independent or no party affiliation during an election year. Yes, this is why we had the two representatives, one from Hillsborough County and the other one from Broward County, who changed their party affiliation after the election because they couldn't, if they were going to do it before the election, they would have had to have done that almost a year in advance. So they've made it, there was a law that was passed last year that essentially it's a 365 days. You've got to be in your place, whichever party you want to go with, or MPA, that far in advance. That's also why Senator Pizzo from Broward County probably did a little bit.
Yeah, Hell downstairs.
Oh, hey, Holly, he's from D-Land between Orlando and Dayton.
um, why Senator Pizzo made the big announcement on the Senate floor regarding the fact that he was changing from Democrat to no party affiliate. He could have waited a little bit longer, but that's just kind of Senator Pizzo, actually. But essentially, that's what all these bills were doing. They were trying to make sure that it would not be possible that if lawsuits were filed, who was going to win, etc. This did get included in the big election bill. And what I mean by the big election bills, these are those all-encompassing ones that are, as I show here on the screen, the Senate bill was like 183 pages and the House bill was 166 page. I mean, they are covering everything. But the focus of these bills was making sure that voters are citizens in every aspect. It was all about making sure the voter is a citizen. Now, we know as league members that this occurs. It's a minor number of people who might be a non-citizen who might try to vote in our elections. But that is what they were focusing on. They were also trying to increase the power of that Office of Election Crimes and Security. They were going to reduce the number of IDs. In fact, they were going to eliminate the student ID. They were shortening early voting days and just so on and so on. But interestingly, they didn't touch vote by mail. That was never part of either of these two bills. So HB 1381, it seemed like if there was anything going to happen associated with voting in elections, it started in the House this year. Very few things started in the Senate. And HB 1381 was originally assigned to three committees. And then it got assigned to just two. One committee was eliminated. And that's what worries you because the fewer committees a bill has to go through, the quicker path it has, the faster path it has to get to the House floor for a vote. And it did pass out of the Government Operations Subcommittee, went to the State Affairs Committee, and it died completely. We were very relieved. A lot of our allies really thought it was dead. I know Capital Alliance, our advisor, that no, we don't need to worry about it. The League, we always worry. But there was no hearing, there was no vote taken once it got to the State Affairs Committee. And then its equivalent, SB 1414, was never even heard in any committee. So there didn't seem to be an appetite to deal with voting and the election bills. I do want to mention, though, about what was happening with the vote by mail. There was a separate bill, two separate bills, HB 1203 and SB 396, that would have drastically limited vote by mail ballot requests. You would have had to prove that you were confined to your home and then provide proof from a medical doctor. And in the House bill, you were actually going to have to indicate if the confinement was permanent or temporary. But again, it was clear that neither the House or the Senate had any appetite for really interfering with anything associated with voting. On the Senate side, it was never heard in any of the three committees it was assigned to. On the House side, it was actually assigned to four committees. And things we keep learning as we go to lobby days is the more committees a bill gets assigned to by either the President of the Senate or the Speaker of the House, that means that they don't like it. Because the more committees you have to go through, it's more hoops, it's more likely to get challenged, have amendments, etc. And so the fact that in the House it was assigned to four committees, it seemed to mean to most people that these aren't going anywhere. Again, the League is always nervous. We're always, wondering what's going to happen. But it truly was the case that voting was not touched by the legislature this year. The other area that we worry about are the proposed constitutional amendments. So just a reminder, if the legislature proposes constitutional amendments, and for that to happen, both the House and the Senate, there has to be a 3/5 vote in both the House and the Senate for a proposed constitutional amendment by the legislature to be put on the ballot. But if that happens, these bills don't get signed by the governor, so it doesn't go to the governor, he can't veto them, nor are they reviewed by the Florida Supreme Court. And this is where some of our really bad amendments have showed up on our ballot, is when they come straight from the legislature, and there's usually an agenda behind them. But there was four proposed constitutional amendments this year. One, they wanted to make sure we already have term limits for state representatives and state senators. They can't serve more than 8 years in both the House or the Senate. But there was this possibility that, well, if you started out young and you served 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate, kind of stepped away for 4 or 5 years, you could come back. And so you would have more than 16 years in the House and Senate. And they decided, no, we didn't like that. They want to make sure you can only be in the 16 years in the legislature for your entire life. The other one was to have term limits for county commissioners and district school boards. This was the only one that had any traction at all. Another one was to elect superintendent of schools in every county. Some counties already do that, but not all counties. And then the fourth one was to eliminate the lieutenant governor, the auditor, and the governor efficiency task force. And it would have created this new office of commissioner of governor efficiency as a cabinet officer. Essentially, a Doge type person would become the cabinet officer. And that did not make traction either. Who knows if we're ever going to have another lieutenant governor. So the one bill out of all that were, filed related to voting election was HB 1205. And this is the one that's amendments to the state constitution. The bill passed both chambers on May 2nd. It was signed into law by the governor within a few hours. I mean, this just, when it got started, it went. There are parts of this bill that are effective now, others that won't be effective until July 1st, and then there's actually another part not effective until October 1st. The only good news out of this particular bill is that it will prohibit public funds being used for political advertisements, either against or for a ballot initiative. So the issue that we saw with Amendment 4 and also with Amendment 3, the marijuana bill, should not happen again. So it's obvious that even the legislators thought the governor had gone a little bit too far with the political advertisements last year. So what is effective now? Because this is what affects the league. The sponsor must deliver the form to the supervisor of elections in the county in which the voter resides, not in the county you might have collected it in. And that has to be given to the supervisor of elections within 10 days of the voter signing the petition. The collector cannot pre-fill any portion of the petition. They can't sign or fill in any missing information for the voter, and they can't copy or retain voter information. That's what's effective now. So from the perspective of the league, this means that before July 1st, we're following the lead of the petition sponsors. That's why for Florida Right to Clean Water petitions, there's no collection at this time. They have ceased all petition collection. For Florida Decides Healthcare, and I've put their website there, we're following the rules regarding no pre-fill and no filling in missing information, and then returning the signed forms within 24 hours to a hub or to the Florida Decides Healthcare auditor. And I've put their address there for your information. You're not returning these to the supervisor of election. And I'm sure your league has already been collecting these petitions. And so you probably know where the hub is. If not, you can go to their website and find out where that hub is located. And it's also on the website where you will find Cynthia Caldwell's address. So what are we going to do starting July 1st? Well, we really don't know because lawsuits have been filed. There was actually the first hearing today to find out what, for Judge Walker, fortunately, Judge Mark Walker has usually been fairly sympathetic to voter rights. And so that's the one good news about the lawsuit so far is that we have a sympathetic judge, but we don't know what he will do with our requests. There's requests, essentially an injunction to stop this law from, it's already in effect, but to stop the bad parts of it that we don't want to have. But what I am going to tell you is some of the terms that are going to be used that you're going to hear. Starting July 1st, they're using the term petition circulator. That is defined as an entity or an individual who collects signatures. No distinction between a volunteer and a paid circulator. However, a petition circulator does not include anyone who collects, delivers, or otherwise physically possesses no more than 25 signed petition forms in addition to those of the person and the person's immediate family. And immediate family is defined as vote by mail. So you are not classified as a petition circulator if you have less than 25 signed petition forms. Okay? Also, starting July 1st, there's a difference in way people will get treated. So if you're paid or volunteer with more than 25, you've got to register with the state and get trained by the state. And you will have a specific petition form that includes a circulator's affidavit. If you're not a petition circulator, and that's somebody who's not paid, and you don't have more than 25 signed petitions, you will use a different petition form that will say for personal use only. And if you get caught with more than 25 signed petitions that aren't yours or your family, it's a third-degree felony. Okay? So essentially, starting July 1st, there's going to be two forms for the same petition. So, like the Medicaid expansion petition, there will be one that a petition circulator will use, and there will be another form for personal use. The language of the ballot measure remains the same. It's just that the form itself is going to change. There'll be two separate petition forms. So we're doing questions at the end, so I'm going to move on to gun violence prevention. So they tried to roll back the minimum age to 18 for purchasing firearms. It passed the House, but then it died in the Senate. I mean, we kind of knew or hoped that this was going to happen. President Albright had kind of indicated didn't want to deal with anything associated with guns, and that's what they stuck to. The other bill, HB 1021, allowed law enforcement to carry a concealed firearm into certain athletic events when they're attending as a private citizen. This passed almost unanimously in the House, 111 to 2. They moved it over to the Senate, never got any hearing. So that did not become law. And then HB 31, this was what Representative Rudman had put out there. This was the open carry bill. You would be allowed to carry, it's a concealed gun, but it's an open carry, even into schools and polling locations. Furthermore, it was going to repeal that red flag law, which allows law enforcement to take guns away from people that they are afraid are going to hurt somebody. Fortunately, this was completely withdrawn when Representative Rudman stepped down to run for Congress up in the Panhandle, and nobody took it up afterwards. There was another bill that was signed by the governor yesterday, and this allows child care center employees to undergo training to carry guns at work. Essentially, this is what we already have for the school systems. This is an expansion of the school guardian bill, and it passed both chambers unanimously. And so that has gone into effect. These were some bills that were supported by the League that never really gained too much attraction. They weren't heard in any committee, and HB 1019 got assigned to 4 committees, so that was automatically the seal of death. But these were dealing with safe storage of firearms and ammunition. And then HB 1019 was the Responsible Gun Ownership Act, again, trying to get more control over firearms when it comes to sales and transfers. And I'm going to leave it at that and turn it over, I think, to Alice. Is going to do it next.
That's correct. Thank you. And I'm going to bring this up. Okay. This actually, I'm only going to cut, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm only going to cover 2 that passed. And this was actually a pretty good year for environmental legislation because of citizen involvement. And both of these really came in because of this. So they're protecting state parks now from getting golf courses and other exploited. And there is a limited amount of protection for oil and gas drilling. And the well, it's there in the I'll say it right, Apalachicola area. So a little background here. In August 20th of 24, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection sneakily rolled out a fast-track plan to build golf courses, pickleball courts, and luxury resorts in 9 of Florida's iconic state parks. Public outrage, bipartisan, immediately erupted, and within days, the Environmental Protection Agency withdrew the request. Well, they postponed it, and then less than 24 hours after that, the DeSantis said, "We're not going to do that. which was stunning because it was less than 9 days that this thing went from, plans on the drawing board to being withdrawn. But the problem with that is it was withdrawn, but they could still bring it back at any time. And the fact that it had to be brought out by a whistleblower was of great concern. So a group sprung up out of the original protest called Save Our Parks. A lot of demonstrations, even after the win, and a lot of lobbying to cross party lines, so that this was having a separate organization and having it so that you have, in this case, a Republican as part of her campaign. That it's passed. It's now DeSantis is waiting for him to sign the bill, and amazingly, it passed 100% vote yes. So the second one arose because there were some permits requested to drill for oil. So the original, an organization sprung up out of this called Kill the Drill. And this was huge. I mean, it wasn't just waterkeepers and Sierra. It was the businesses in those areas. It was the oyster farmers, the orchards and everything else all came in as sponsors on this. And they had this separate organization that had, protests and everything. The original bill got pared way down. It originally was to cover all 3 of Florida's national estuarine research reserves. The version that passed just did the Apalachicola, but that's pretty good because that covers Calhoun, Gulf, and Franklin counties. So that, and there's also one of the drilling permits. Another piece of good news is that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection has said that they want to deny the drilling permit in the Apalachicola area. And the oyster farmers are so happy. All right. Reproductive rights, unlike environmental legislation, nothing happened on reproductive rights. So there were 2 bills that were hoped there was some movement on. The first one was basically to repeal the ban and put things back to the way they were before these laws went into effect. And nobody expected that to pass with our current legislation, but it was out there and supported by the league. And the exceptions one was the one where Planned Parenthood, the league, everybody had hoped that we could get some movement, so that that instead of requiring 2 doctors, 1 doctor verify that the woman's health is in danger. And it expanded the definition of imminent death, so due to fetal anomaly. So somebody like the Dolberts, who had a genetic condition in the child that the child would die upon birth, were forced to carry the child to term and watch it suffocate to death in their arms. This did not pass. Now, in the bad bill category, we have civil liberties of an unborn child. It basically gives fetal personhood, and this is the second time this has come up. So expect this to be a perennial. And there are a lot of complications that would come out of something passing like this, with IVF or any number of lawsuits. And part of what helps kill these and what helped is getting the insurance industry to speak up. And that's part of the ones that got killed, is saying, you know, if you start getting claims on these, your insurance is going to go up. Young person is accessing health care. This would have not allowed someone that is a minor to be able to get counseling, birth control, get tested or treated for sexually transmitted infections. And it also banned whether or not you could actually see whether these measures were working or not. It was framed as parental rights, and expect this one in some form to come up perennially too. You've got the one where fetal personhood. On here, the parental rights issues, that's what they're going to keep readdressing these restrictions on. And this died in committee as well. This one's an education bill, which I will shortly pass over to Jill. But indoctrination in public schools, they slipped into here a requirement that students see a fetal development video, probably Baby Olivia. And for those that don't know Baby Olivia, I'm going to put in the chat the link to see it and the link of why it's bad. That ended up removed. And I will pass now to Jill so she can talk about the education bills.
Jill?
Hey, thank you. So first of all, I want to say today is a great day for me to be talking about education bills because some good stuff happened in Washington. The Supreme Court today blocked a taxpayer-funded religious charter school. And we've been waiting with bated breath to see what was going to happen with that. Charter schools or public schools, they should not be funded with if they are religious charter schools. The second thing that happened today is that a district judge, blocked President Trump's executive order that called for the closing of the Department of Education. Okay, so things are starting to look up, yes. Of course, that's going to be appealed. You know, he also ordered that the staff that was fired be rehired. And that's critical because the judge said, obviously, the Department of Education cannot fulfill all the obligations it has to do certain things when you lose half the staff. So this is a good day for education. All right, let me get my slides up. I only have 2 slides. So I do want to say that my slides are not nearly as interesting looking as what you've seen previously from Monica and Alice. But what I've done here is I've listed what the bills are and what the status is. Did it die? Did it get enrolled, which means it's gone over to the governor for his signature, or did nothing happen to it? And then what was the league's position on this bill? Did we oppose it? Did we support it? Did we not take a position? So the first bill is the Employment of Minors bill. And I've got of minors in parentheses because it was posted as employment of minors, but at some point the word of minors came out. I think it was drawing too much attention. But this bill originally would have allowed 14 and 15-year-olds to work if they were homeschooled or if they had graduated high school or if they were attending school virtually. It would have allowed them to work many hours, unrestricted hours and unrestricted days. They took the 14 and 15-year-olds out of the bill and left it where it was just 16 and 17-year-olds. and they were going to be allowed to work full-time, including during the school year, and without parental permission. So, and it was removing a lot of the protections that workers had in terms of things like breaks and how, what kind of temperature they could work in and whether they could be working on roofs, under dangerous jobs, things like that. We were very much opposed to that bill. And I want to thank the people who are here because I know a lot of you got action alerts about this and other education bills, and you responded. You contacted your representatives. You maybe phoned them or emailed them, and our advocacy was successful. This bill died. So the next bill that was also opposed by the education action teams, and you responded to our action alerts on this one, was a bill that it was called Materials Harmful to Minors. And this one said that no longer would you use the Miller test that had the requirement that you consider whether a book that was challenged had literary value or artistic value or scientific value or even political value. It said you could not remove a book if it had that criteria, if it met that criteria. This bill would have removed that criteria. So many more books would have been removed from the shelves. That bill died. The next bill we actually supported. This bill would have made the presidential search for Florida's universities and colleges transparent, which it is not right now, which is how we end up with people like Ben Sass and Richard Corcoran in presidential positions. They're political appointments, okay? This one also died. The next bill became an omnibus bill, and this is the one that Alice was just talking about that had baby Olivia in it. We did not take a position on this bill because it had so many things in it. For instance, it did have the baby Olivia video in it originally, but it also had things like no longer could a person who was going for a teacher certification be considered to have a field experience if they didn't actually teach a class. So this was changed to where you actually had to teach a class. It also included things about math and reading instruction requirements. It also said you couldn't commit corporal punishment on a child unless you had parental permission. So it was really all over the place. And in fact, when it started, it was 40 pages long, but it ended up with being 83 pages. So things were stuffed into the bill even as it was making its way through committee. And this one did get enrolled. It's waiting for the governor's signature. The school readiness bill, we supported that one. And that one changed the eligibility requirement from using the using the federal median income as the determinant whether you'd be eligible to using the state median income. And it really would enable more children in migrant families to enroll in those school readiness programs. The next one also got enrolled, and this was the one now that also did change the field experience to clinical experience. And we supported that idea. Okay, next slide. Let's see how I do that. Not sure how I get to the next slide. Every system is different. Let's see. Okay. The next bill also became an omnibus bill. It started at 17 pages, but it became 70 pages. And this bill is a charter conversion bill. In 2024, Florida had 23 charter conversion schools, but the state would like to have more. And so it is looking at places, schools that are underutilized or that are empty in school districts. And it is allowing municipalities to turn those empty or underutilized schools into job engine schools. So they're creating career training programs in the converted school. One of the problems with this bill is that only parents are getting to vote. And what you have to have is a majority of parents who have kids enrolled in the school, so 51%, would have to vote in order for the vote to be considered legitimate. And then a majority of those, so maybe 26%, have to agree that they want the school to be converted into a charter school. Well, that means that 26% of the parents, out of 100% of the parents, can make a decision to convert a school into a charter school. This is not fair. Previously, teachers were eligible to vote as well, but this bill changes that. And this bill we opposed, but it has gone to the governor for signature. So the next bill we were strongly opposed to, and this bill is kind of nuts. It started as 9 pages. I'm just fascinated with how they, as the bill went along, they kept cramming more stuff into it. What they would do, they would take features of another bill that they knew wasn't going to make it through, and they would take pieces of it that they thought legislators liked, and they would stick it in another bill that they thought might pass. So they thought this bill would pass. Fortunately, it died. What it was going to do was have these schools of hope co-locate, that is, be in the same place as the traditional public school. So you have 2 schools operating in one building. Who's in charge? What do you do with parents? Where's the main office? Who's supervising the kids? Whose kids are they? Do they belong to the School of Hope? Do they belong to the traditional schools? It gets a little bit confusing. This bill also allowed the Board of Trustees, the Board of Governors to appoint presidents at public universities and colleges. So again, it removes the transparency that we were hoping for. That bill we opposed. The Family Empowerment Scholarship Program died. This one we were supporting because this was really important. You know, when parents of children who have learning challenges, they're ESE children, they have, you know, an IEP or a 504, they need services for their children. And they maybe are dissatisfied with what's happening in the public school. So they think, oh, a private school would be better. So they enroll the child in the private school expecting services, but the private school has no requirement to offer any services. This bill would have required that parents who are considering enrolling their child in the school be notified before enrollment what accommodations, what therapies would be available to the child if enrolled in the school. And we thought this was a great idea. Private schools have no accountability at all. We don't know how the students are doing academically. We don't know how qualified or unqualified the teachers are. So we had hoped that this would pass, but it did not. Okay, the last one the Educational Scholarship Program. This is the bill that you've probably heard about. It cuts in half the FTEs received by the student and by the school district for the special programs like AP, the IB program, the dual enrollment program, some career technical education programs, cuts that in half. It was decided that this is a budget bill. And so, as you know, we are waiting to find out what the budget's going to look like. And we are waiting to find out what is going to happen with this bill. We do not know. I have a meeting by phone tomorrow with a student and Senator Gruters. And we're going to be talking about this bill and why he really needs to oppose the cut proposed to this program or to these programs in this bill. So that's it.
Oh, thank you, Monica, Alice, and Jill, for your outstanding presentations and your updates to us. Nina, I am going to ask you if we have any questions in the chat for our speakers.
Actually, I don't see any, but they might have gone to someone else. I do have a notice here from Dr. Elliott that she got a notice on her phone that House Bill 209, called the State Park Preservation Act, was signed by the governor this evening just before 5.
Okay.
If there's any questions, put them in.
That is, we had Sierra Club here, and they really did. They did a lot of work about it wasn't just a legislative update. It was also talking about, their advocacy work and what they're looking for in the future to work on. And one of the things that they said was that this is extremely effective to have an organization that's not identified, which, thankfully the League is not identified with a particular party. And in both of the cases of the ones where they won, there was a citizens organization that just propped up that they could all get behind for that specific issue. And I know the League, if you look at something like National Popular Vote, well, we now have National Popular Vote of Florida that's just focused on that. And Deb is able to get people that are Republicans and Democrats and no party affiliates to back it. So it's particularly important in this state.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing about the education bills, the federal bills. There is a bill for a national voucher program. It's HR 833, and everyone here and all League members will be getting an action alert. Right now, that bill has 87 co-sponsors, and it will be devastating if every state now has a voucher program. We know that it costs $4 billion in Florida this past year, and we know that the things like the reduction of hours for the AP and dual enrollment classes are because of the costs of those vouchers. We know those vouchers are going to religious private schools, which also is questionable. But you will get an action alert asking you to please contact your representatives in Congress and ask them to vote against that voucher bill.
Thank you. A message came to me from Rana complimenting Monica and Alice and Jill specifically for making the difficult material understandable that she said sort of. Monica, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I do want to alert people to is the fact that none of the voting laws passed except for the petition bill this year doesn't mean that they won't show up again. And so that's one thing that we need to remember as league members is that when we're out there talking with people, doing, tabling at various events on whatever topic it might be, is just to be sure that the public understands that if they like what they're doing right now in terms of they like the vote by mail system that we have, they like those extended early voting days, then they need to be telling their legislators that they don't want it to change. So I guess I just want to say that it was a bad year in terms of the petition bill 1205. It could have been worse, but we still have one more legislative session before the 2026 elections. And we just hope everything stays the same because every time something changed related to voting, we run into problems. And that's what we want to avoid.
Thank you, Monica.
I
I will remind people to address their chat questions to Nina
Right.
Tortelli, if you have questions.
And I do have one here, actually from Linda, regarding, and I'm going to read it, the Ring Lane issue. It says the Ring Lane issue is not over. A friend wrote Senator Boyd regarding the transfer of the Ring Lane to New College. His written response, no standalone bills were filed for the 2025 legislative session regarding this transfer. Instead, it's anticipated to be part of our budget discussions, which will take place during the budget conference process. You may be aware that the Florida legislation is still finalizing the budget for the 2025-26 period. Any panelists' comments on that issue?
I would just say every time I think about New College taking over an art museum, I'm imagining empty walls because all the nudes will be taken down. So that's my personal reaction, but it's awful.
And I have another question here from Rebecca. How early are bills introduced annually? She says, I'm always feeling last minute knowing.
Right. And one thing this year, the legislature didn't start till March, although we had they called into session early. Because 2026 is a voting year, the legislature will actually start in January. And so you will start to see bills, filed almost immediately after this session ends, assuming that it ends. Technically, they have to come up with a balanced budget by July 1st. But it's definitely by September, you're going to start seeing some bills filed. And so that means from the league perspective, we're going to be asking for league priorities earlier than we did last year. See, essentially, almost as soon as this legislature is over, we're going to start the process all over again.
And I think we have time for one last question. This is from Nancy regarding the citizens-led petitions. For individuals collecting less than 25 petitions, is it a final total limit of 25 petitions or a limit of less than 25 each time the individual submits them?
It's a good question. There's a lot of ambiguity in the law. That's something that we are discussing with the league's lawyers. If you were to read it literally, or I think the way the legislature intended it does mean a 25 petition limit. But they've made it pretty easy to get around if somebody were to go that direction. So that's what we'll have to figure out how to do it.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to you, Ruth.
Nina, thank you so much. Thank all of you for your questions. But again, thank you, Monica Alice and Jill. These were enlightening and really important presentations for our participants to hear. We would encourage all of you to share the video of this presentation, which will be posted by tomorrow on the League of Women Voters of Manatee County YouTube channel, and we will send a link to all who registered for this event. Our league has some exciting programs that we hope you will join. You can see the upcoming events and action team meetings on our website, which is lwvmanatee.org. On that same homepage, if you have not already done so, click the membership link and please join the league. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to our marvelous speakers. Thank you so much.